Hello and welcome to Hong Kong Lit Club, the monthly show for written word enthusiasts hoping to embark on a literary journey through Hong Kong. In this podcast, we will explore what happens when we look beyond Hong Kong as an Asian financial hub and a so-called cultural desert. My name is Julia and I will be your host. I'm a librarian by trade, a Hong Konger at heart, and someone who believes in the power of words to tell the story of a city. Without further ado, let's dive in. Who are the writers of Hong Kong, and what do they have to say? Imagine a world where the food on your plate could land you in prison. In today's episode, author Rinkoo Ramchandani takes us to a near-future New York, where the global fallout from the pandemic has reshaped society in unimaginable ways. We follow Jane Chan, a meticulous accountant, as she finds herself drawn into this shadowy world, not just for the food, but for a chance to reconnect with her estranged brother. This is a story about family, identity, and the lengths we go to hold on to the past. But first, I'd like to introduce our author. Rinkoo is an executive coach at Outlawed Coaching and a creative writer. She sits on the committee of the Hong Kong Women in Publishing Society and is an advisor for the Hong Kong International Literary Festival. This piece, titled A Fistful of Feet, has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize in the Best of the Small Presses series. Now, that's a big deal. Before we dive into the inspiration behind the text, let's listen to the story read by the author herself. This is A Fistful of Feet by Rinkoo Ramchandani.
Tonight, Jane Chan will break the law for the first time. She opens her shoe cabinet and wonders which of her ballet flats is most appropriate when planning to commit a felony. She selects a plain black pair from the dozen that are lined up on the shelf. She glances at herself in the mirror in the hallway one more time and concludes that she looks decidedly unmemorable in her jeans and gray crew neck. At 4'11" and weighing 100 pounds, she might easily be dismissed. But doing so would be a mistake. Jane sweeps her palms down her straight shoulder-length hair once more, as if to confirm every strand is in its place. Then she fishes out her house keys from the crystal bowl and leaves. The subway is close by, and the ride to New York's Chinatown short. Jane hasn't dined there since her parents died over 5 years ago. So much has changed since then, but not Chinatown. She's glad her parents didn't live to see what happened, and the path Jeffrey subsequently chose. 4 years ago, yet another global pandemic struck, and this time wiped out nearly 10% of the world's population. Much like the others, it originated in the wildlife trade. As memories of the pandemic before that one were still fresh, it was enough to propel the Green Party to power, which then outlawed the use of all products derived from animals. Price gouging and hoarding of remaining stocks gave way to violent protests until the country descended into an uneasy acceptance. Jane arrives at the Canal Street subway station and walks a few minutes to the address on her phone. At any other time, she would have been sure it was wrong, but she had heard that eateasies are hidden behind unmarked doors, or legitimate businesses even. And Jeffrey's text is clear. Look for the brown door, halfway down this alley, a back exit to a walk-up. 3rd floor, Unit B. Ask for me. Jane arrives at the door and hesitates. Is she really going to do this? Eateasies, initially called underground restaurants, began sprouting up soon after the new law had passed. Not wasting any time, opportunists and entrepreneurs set up these illicit dining clubs and their supply chains all over the city. There were whispers that one could find eateasies for every possible cuisine, from tandoori chicken in the folds of Little India to classic New York-style pepperoni pizza tucked away in the corners of Soho. Operating under extreme secrecy, getting a table or a fresh cut of meat is nearly impossible for the average New Yorker. Unless you know a guy. and Jane knows a guy. She takes a deep breath and knocks twice. No answer. She knocks again and waits for a longer time. Wondering if she has the right address, she pulls out her phone to text Jeffrey when the door opens, held ajar with the chain on. What? The man peers from the crack and asks in Cantonese. Oh, hi, she says. I'm here to meet Jeffrey. Nowadays, she only speaks Cantonese with an elderly aunt, and the words feel foreign in her mouth. The man lets her in. The room is empty, except for a few folding chairs up against a wall. The windows are boarded over, and the only source of light is a solitary bulb. He tells Jane to wait here, and leaves through the back door. Jane waits for a few minutes, then takes out a pack of tissues from her handbag and wipes down one of the chairs. Just as she sits down, the inside door opens and a different man tells Jane to follow him. They walk down a narrow corridor, as basic as the waiting room. Before opening the door at the end of the hallway, he tells her to hand over her cell phone. He lets her in after she complies. The scene is what Jane had imagined. No more than a dozen folding tables packed with diners crowded in a small room, without table dividers. The sound of melamine dishes clacking as waitstaff buzz about small spaces, clearing tables and taking orders, and patrons compete to be heard. On one end of the room is a counter with a pane of plexiglass separating the makeshift kitchen from the eating area. Chunks of barbecued meat hang from the hooks above the counter, and the chef cooks in a small space behind the display. For a moment, the smells transport Jane to the cha-cha-tangs her mother used to take her and Jeffrey to after school on Fridays for one dine. Jane hasn't smelled or eaten meat since the new law had passed, and now the heavy odor of death hangs in the air, assaulting her. Across the room, she spots Jeffrey. She smiles and walks over, unsure how to greet her estranged brother after 2 years. Hi, Jeffrey, she says. Jeffrey smiles back at his baby sister and leans in for a half hug, surprising her. His dimples are more pronounced than Jane remembers. Thanks for coming, sis, he says. To be honest, I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, she says, then pauses. But I wanted to see you. And, well, I suppose there was some curiosity on my part about all this. She gestures to the room. Jeffrey smiles again as they both sit down at the small corner table. He is tall and gaunt, his boyishness replaced with a leathery, worn face that makes him look older than his years. They do have food I can eat too, right? Jane asks. Yeah, sure, he says. A wing serves everything you would have found at a Cantonese restaurant. But here we pre-order, so I took the liberty. She nods. After a pause, he tells her that she looks good. Thank you, she says. I'm afraid I can't return the compliment. You're all skin and bones. Have you been ill? I was for a while, yeah, he starts. But I'm better now. So let's not talk about that. Tell me, how have you been these past couple of years? Jane tells him a little about her job, her recent promotion at the Midtown company where she works as an accountant. She talks for a while about their cousin and other extended family and friends. She realizes she's chatting more than usual. Jeffrey listens without interruption and smiles intermittently. She tells him how cranky Uncle Henry's been getting in recent years, and they both laugh. Then she asks him when he got back into the city. You mean, when did I get out of prison? He asks. A couple of months ago. It wasn't a prison, Jeffrey, she says, immediately regretting it. I'm sorry, please continue. No, that's okay, he says, fairly audible. I want to hear what you think it was. Jeffrey, it was a rehabilitation program on a farm. He inhales deeply as if he's doing his breathing exercises, then says, They They shipped us up country for empathy training. Jane has to strain to hear the words. Like cattle on a truck we lived with and cleaned up after pigs and chickens, never being able to eat any of them. They made us watch videos of slaughterhouses over and over and tried to brainwash us. The pungent smell of meat mixed with sweat is overpowering now, and Jane struggles to breathe. She wonders how difficult it would be to yank out one of the slabs of wood to crack open a window. She stares at the panel closest to her, then looks back at Jeffrey, bracing herself for this conversation. You knew the law and flouted it anyway. You went about your business as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Jeffrey shakes his head as she speaks and looks away. I'm not doing this again, he says, and continues to shake his head. I'm not having this conversation with you. Like many families, the siblings are divided on the approach and adoption of the stringent measures. They stop speaking just as the food arrives. First comes the char siu, then beef balls and choy sum, followed by the rest. Jane looks at the wood ear mushrooms with tofu skin and is thankful Jeffrey remembered her favorite. They eat in silence for a few minutes. She tries not to look at Jeffrey's bamboo baskets and plates, but cannot resist. He has ordered all the same foods he used to at the family dinners many years ago. Her eyes linger on the char siu in particular, the glossy, film, succulent pieces of flesh, on top of the pink gelatinous layer with its sweet, heady aroma. She chews on the tofu skin without expression. It smells milky, and she wonders if it's fresh. She decides she cooks it better at home. She looks at the char siu again as Jeffrey tears into it, not realizing she's watching him eat. The room doesn't feel stuffy anymore, as Jane relaxes, surrounded by her childhood comfort foods, even if she can't eat them. Do you miss it? Jeffrey asks, as if reading her mind. No? Right, he says, picking up a perfectly round beef ball. Jeffrey puts away a lot for a man his size. It's as if he doesn't know when he will be able to eat like this again. Finally, Jane breaks the silence by asking about the children. Jeffrey's divorce and subsequent incarceration meant he didn't see his children much. He had a supervised visit last weekend, and that brings him to the reason he wanted to see her. A couple of months on a fishing boat with his buddy Pete from Maine, and some others. Yes, it's dangerous, and yes, this would be his third strike if caught, but the money is great and it's closest to what he did before. Get him back on his feet. The catch would be amazing now. The need to stay under the radar, literally. Would she continue to check in on the kids every now and then? Why, Jeffrey? She asks, her eyes widening. This is it. This is our world now. Why can't you accept it? Because it's wrong, he says. His voice is louder now, and people at the next table stop their conversation to stare at him. It's messed with our rights. And it's messed with the natural order of things. The order has evolved, Jeffrey, and we have all the alternatives we need, Jane says, matching his volume. We haven't needed animals for sustenance for decades or longer even. What was once a necessity is now hubris. I mean, what good is our cognitive reasoning if we can't even read the writing on the wall? Fearing that she sounds like the posters from the early years of the change, she stops. Jeffrey, 2 years older, has been losing arguments to Jane since they were kids. He waits for her to finish, then says, I didn't invite you here to fight, little sis. His shoulders relax, as if a weight has been lifted off them. We will never agree on this issue, so let's drop it. I just wanted to tell you about my plans, not ask for permission. She promised her parents that she would look out for Jeffrey, but she has failed them. And him. They eat the rest of their meal in silence. Jeffrey settles the bill in cash, declining Jane's offer to pay. They stop at the counter to speak to Owen through the glass pane on their way out. Jane thanks him and waits for her brother to finish his conversation with his old buddy. In the corner of the counter, she notices a plate full of marinated chicken feet, the kind her mother used to make. Jane looks around to see everyone consumed by their meals and conversations, even Jeffrey. She grabs a fistful of feet, swiftly shoving them into her handbag, and wipes her hand on her jeans. Jeffrey says goodbye to the staff and they exit, receiving their cell phones back in the front room. Jeffrey walks Jane to the main street and waits with her while she hails a cab. When one pulls up, Jane hugs her brother tight this time. You know, in spite of everything, you and me, we're not that different, he says, and smiles. I love you, little sis. I love you too, Jeffrey, and please be careful out there. At this hour, Jane arrives home in under 10 minutes. She pays the fare and sprints up to her apartment, nearly tripping on a step. Letting herself in, she flings her shoes off in the hallway and throws the keys on the table so hard they slide off the edge and fall on the floor. She slams the light on and reaches into her handbag, pulling out a foot. Then she settles into the sofa and begins sucking it, smacking her lips with pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Rinkoo read A Fistful of Feet. I would like to thank the Eaton Hotel for allowing me to record the following interview section of the episode, where Rinkoo and I discuss the possibility of a meatless Hong Kong, the family dynamics at play in the story, and Rinkoo's general inspiration behind the text. Hi, Rinkoo. Very nice
Julia.
to see you tonight.
Likewise.
Did you have a good day?
I did indeed. Thank you.
So we are here in the recording booth of the Eaton Hotel to talk a bit about you, your writing, and obviously your short story, A Fistful of Feet. So let's dive in right away. I want to know, first of all, what inspired you to write A Fistful of Feet? Were there any personal experiences or current events that influenced you in the creation of this story?
Yeah, I think there are two things when I think back on that, because I wrote this a few years ago. The first was this idea that, well, I'd been toying with the idea of becoming a vegan and really struggling with it. I call myself a failing vegan. And what I struggle with is this, that every time I come across foods that remind me of my childhood, that I really, really liked eating, that I couldn't resist. I had to just give in. And so that was one thing, and I've been thinking about that. But at the same time, I'd also been reading a little bit about the fact that what it's doing to our environment, right? What it's doing to what our demand for meat, especially and dairy, is doing to our to the earth, essentially, and this idea that we don't need it, that there is a mass overconsumption of these products, mass waste of food products, and I'm convinced that this is just a matter of time when we will realize that, and when these things simply won't be available to us, not in the way they are today. It feels like the days of having endless amounts of meat and dairy and fish, these our days are numbered. So I wanted to toy around with that idea, but also with my own desires of wanting to consume some of these things.
So would you say, I'm hearing that you're saying that's the future we can expect? So we're going towards meatless society, or at least in less, where meat would be less available, or wouldn't be the first choice, or wouldn't be necessarily always there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we don't have a crystal ball, but I believe that, and this may not happen in our lifetime, but I believe that there will be a future where meat will be available, but not in the form it is today, that it'll be perhaps lab grown or engineered some other way. But the idea of farms and essentially cattle and livestock, I think that that's not sustainable for us in the longer term. I'm not a scientist, but based on the few things I've read, it feels like it's headed in that direction because we can't seem to get our desires, our needs, our consumption under control. And it's absolutely wreaking havoc.
Hong Kongers love their meat. In fact, Hong Kong has the highest consumption of meat per head, I found out. How would that go? How would Hong Kongers go from being the highest consumers of meat to more health-conscious people or a place where those things would be more regulated? Well, what's the path to get there?
Well, I think we're seeing it now. Even 5-10 years ago, you walk into a restaurant and you wouldn't necessarily see options on the menu for the veggie burgers and the vegan dim sums. But you do now. You see that in a lot of restaurants. You'll see alternative pork options and impossible beef options and or even homemade patties in restaurants. A lot of restaurants now offer that, so we're starting to see it more. It's becoming more mainstream. You don't have to go to a Buddhist vegetarian restaurant to get that kind of food, whereas you did at one time, and now you can go to a regular restaurant with friends who do eat meat and still have alternative options to explore. So I think it's starting. Do I think it's going to take over? Look, probably not in the next 20-30 years, but I do think that something is going to change eventually, yes.
The future will tell.
Yes, indeed.
I'm curious as to why you chose to have the story set in New York City, in Chinatown, in the US, rather than in Hong Kong.
That's a very good question. And when I think about the options for the stories, they weren't US versus Hong Kong. It was very much New York City versus Hong Kong. I spend some time in New York City. My sister lives there, and we were raised in Hong Kong. And even now, my sister, even though she lives in New York City, she hangs out a lot in Chinatown, and she goes there for everything. And when I visit her, we end up spending a lot of time in Chinatown. So it wasn't that I would consider setting the story anywhere else in the U.S. It couldn't be in Boston or Chicago or L.A. It absolutely couldn't. It had to be Chinatown in New York City in the future, or the other option that I was looking at was Mongkok. It was going to be in Hong Kong, and it was going to take place in somewhere in Mongkok. And then I finally went with that. It just felt like it would be a better fit. But I'm not entirely sure that I can articulate why.
I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of Hong Kongers who do move away and are still looking for what that means, right? To be from Hong Kong, to live abroad, to have families scattered everywhere in Canada, in the US, still in Hong Kong, in mainland. So I thought it was a very smart choice, because that's what it is, actually. It's quite a mirror of the way a lot of Hong Kongers live. So I don't know if you were thinking about that, or if it was just your own travel experiences, like you said.
Oh, yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, I like I mentioned earlier that my sister spends so much of her time in Chinatown, but also I see my nieces and nephews when they come back home from grad school and whatnot, and how much they're craving the foods that they grew up with, and how much they look for it, even in the cities where they are living now, where they're studying. And I think back to my own trips, as much as I like trying different foods when I'm traveling, after a few days, I want to eat my Chinese food or my Indian food, and I look for it. Much to my brother's disappointment, but it's something that I crave after a while. It's comfort.
So what would be your ultimate comfort food? If you were to choose, you just said Chinese food, Indian food. If you had to pick one dish when you're feeling low, you're missing home, this is what you want. what would it be?
This is a very difficult question.
I'm putting you on the spot as well. That was not in the script, by the way. Everyone, you should know this. So Rinkoo is thinking hard right now.
It would have to be I can't pick one. It would be either lentil rice, Indian food, dal rice, or it would be essentially stir-fried tofu rice.
Definitely rice. Rice is in the picture.
Only because it's a big part of what we're eating both in Chinese and Indian foods, and those are the foods that we grew up with. So, yeah, it would probably be in the picture.
Do you cook those yourself at home?
God, no.
I was going to say, I'll come over and try, but I guess not. We'll have to find a place that serves them.
No, the kitchen is not my favorite room in the house, unless it's to make a cup of coffee.
Well, we don't necessarily like to cook, but we all like to eat, so I'm sure we can find a way around that. That's okay. Let's talk a bit about the concept of eateasies, which I love. Not eateries, eateasies. Obviously, sort of mixed between eateries and speakeasies. So can you tell me a little bit about your this concept and this idea of hidden dining clubs in a post-pandemic society? It's quite intriguing. How did you develop this underground food culture?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the idea of speakeasies, and though we often hear, we come across them even now in cities, but places where the door isn't very obvious, the entrance, or it's not marked, or you need some sort of a code to get in. So I was intrigued by that, and I was trying to imagine what would happen if animal products were to be outlawed. And the first thing I thought of was that, well, they're going to be outlawed, but they won't go away. They'll just go. It'll just be traded underground, like anything else, really. Anything else that's outlawed is traded underground and in dark alleys. So that's what would happen. And that gave me the idea of hidden dining clubs, and decided to call them eateasies. The idea that you have to eat quietly, but obviously that's a literal sense of the word, but it would be secret places where you can go and eat illicit foods.
You need to know a guy to get in.
You need to know a guy. Absolutely.
That's the only way.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk about the sensory descriptions, particularly related to food. So we talked about the emotional aspect related to family and memories. But more importantly, I want to know about your choice of chicken feet. Of all the kinds of meats you could have chosen, chicken feet were the ones. Obviously very visual, but tell me a bit about that. Was that your obvious choice? Could you see those even before you started writing, or
No. I remember having this conversation with a friend over dinner, and I toyed with the idea of char siu that when Jane leaves the restaurant, she would she put a piece of char siu in her purse, and then we knocked around the idea of, well, no, what if it was something much more divisive? Because everybody loves char siu, but chicken feet is something that you eat. As far as I can tell, there's some people who absolutely love it, and others find it very repulsive. The idea of them repulsive, which is really something that you could say about all meats, right? People who are eating meat, they love it, and then I know of people who are vegan or simply avoid certain foods, and the idea of those meats to them would be just disgusting. But chicken feet in particular is very divisive, right? So I was thinking about what would surprise us, what would surprise the readers. What could Jane essentially grab from the restaurant that would be such a, not a core, but a cultural, it has a very cultural resonance, but it would be a very divisive object. And I didn't want to use stinky tofu, obviously, because that's vegetarian. I wanted to use something that was illegal, that was in that world.
Mm. Yes, and I love that it's her dark little secret, and that's something that it's easy to grab, isn't it? You can see that happening. It's just and a fistful as well. I just love that in the title. We'll talk a bit about that. The thing that our listeners need to know is that just before I met Rinkoo just now, I got myself a snack in the food court at the Eaton Hotel. This little Vietnamese place, and got some jowl. I never know how to pronounce it. And on the menu were chicken feet. And I think now, after reading your story, this is it. Whenever I see them, hear about them, read that on the menu, I will always think of your story. This is it.
Then I've done my job.
You have. This story has left a lasting impression on me. So let's come back to the title. A Fistful of Feet. It sounds amazing, of course. Was that same thing? Where did the idea come from? What were you looking for with that choice of the words fistful? And weren't you worried that it would give away what was going to happen, choosing that as a title in the beginning?
I was, and I played with a couple of options for titles, but when I sent it to, it was initially published in Imprint, which is the anthology for women in publishing. And when I sent it to the editor there, and she said she was going to show it to a couple of people to see if they guessed the ending, because we didn't want to give it away. But because chicken feet is not mentioned in the story, essentially, it just pops up at the very end. It didn't give it away. It wasn't obvious what was going to happen. So that's how we landed on that. And to me, it was just a better sounding title than the other option was to call it Speakeasies, the Speakeasy. But I just decided that the Fistful of Feet resonated more with me. It felt like it was going to be the right title for the story.
It is the right title, and it didn't give it away. Actually, I did not think of what was going to happen. So great choice. Well done. Let's talk about Jane and her brother's relationship. Sorry, his name, I forgot. Jeffrey, yes, Jeffrey. So we can tell from the story that Jane and Jeffrey grew up quite close. They had a close bond when they were younger, and their differing opinions on this concept of meat and the legal aspect of it divided them clearly, and they have been estranged for 2 years. What made you want to explore these family dynamics?
Well, I grew up in a large family, very close to my brothers and sisters and various other family members as well. And so the idea of the dynamics between siblings is one that I'm very familiar with. So I thought that would be fun to fictionalize and make that part of the story. And I didn't want this to be an estranged husband or a parent. I wanted to make this about siblings, because siblings can be and very often are divided on controversial matters, on political matters. And so I just thought it would be really fun to explore the point of view of two siblings on such a controversial law and how they're each interpreting it and living life with it and resisting it, essentially, like we see Jeffrey doing. It was something that comes from my own personal experience of being close with my siblings.
So is that something you've experienced where, like you said, maybe you disagree on some things with your siblings, but then you decide collectively for your own sake and your relationship's sake to just agree to disagree and leave it at that? Are you able to do that and move on in your relationship and have a good time together?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 5 of us, and then there's some of them are married, and then there's children involved. And so you can imagine that we don't always agree on everything, but we're still a tight bunch. And the only way we can manage that is by putting some of these disagreements aside. But I don't think we would ever allow something like that, at least not, I don't believe we would ever allow something like that to get in the way of our relationship like Jane and Jeffrey do. So that part, I was, it was purely fiction. I just can't imagine that this would ever drive a wedge between us, because we do eat different things and we feel differently about foods. For instance, I haven't eaten meat in over 20 years, and my siblings love it. But I just, we may joke about it, and sometimes the conversation gets, let's say, a little spirited, but it would never has, and I can't imagine it ever would really drive a wedge between us.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. I like that. Jeffrey says something like, we're not all that different, you and I. Is that because deep down Jeffrey knows what she's up to? Does he know what she's about to do?
I think so. I think from the corner of his eye, I mean, I'd leave it to the reader, but in my mind, yes, I think Jeffrey sort of knows that she grabbed a few of those chicken feet and stuck them in her bag. And also, Jeffrey was observing his sister, watching him eat, and he could tell that she was getting tempted. While he was eating, she wanted to reach across the table and grab some of his food, but she didn't. She waited until nobody was looking.
So he was quite respectful of her in a way, because he probably could sense that, like you said, and he just let her do her thing without mentioning it, without pointing to the irony, right? Of, oh, here you come with your big ideas and you're telling me all about morality, but then, well, that's what you're doing. Secretly, you're going to eat your chicken feet later. Whereas she, obviously puts on this sort of grandeur and she doesn't follow through. So I thought that was really, in a nutshell, what sibling relationships are about. They're about sort of forgiving the other and letting things slide and choosing when to bring things up and make things a problem. The way that we can be allies against parents, for example, with our siblings, right? Something like that. So that was really, really great to read about.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Julia. That's exactly what the intention was, because my mother used to always say that we don't always need to be right in these situations. Sometimes it's okay to let things go, and for the sake of preserving your relationship. And I learned that from her. So I absolutely imagine Jeffrey doing that with Jane.
This is what we would call speculative fiction. Is that a genre that you are interested in exploring more? Do you read sort of dystopian novels? Is that something you're quite accustomed to? Is it new? What's your take on it?
Not particularly. It's not something that I'm necessarily reading a lot of. I mean, I read a few here and there, a few novels and short stories that would be classified as dystopian. And actually, no, I don't necessarily think about writing dystopian books or stories in particular. This was a one-off. And some of the other stories I've written, they would be very much set in the present day or in the past. I do write some memoir pieces as well. So this was definitely a bit of a anomaly for me. But I think that I enjoyed it so much, I would absolutely love to explore what that would be like to either to keep this story going, or maybe think about writing some other pieces that are set in the not too distant future.
What are you working on in terms of writing at the moment?
So at the moment, I do mostly short stories. I have a couple coming out in March, both with the anthologies with the Hong Kong Writers Circle as well as the Women in Publishing anthologies. So I'm looking forward to that. And also working on, I'm setting my stories in Hong Kong a lot at the moment. And I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying being out and about in the city, looking at things and trying to find a way of integrating what I'm looking at into one of my short stories. So at the moment, I'm very much based in Hong Kong, in my head, in my stories. And my long-term project, I do have a memoir that I've sort of shelved for a long time about the loss of my mother. And that's something that I do hope one day I will return to. But it's I don't have a time frame for it. And it's a difficult memoir to return to, essentially. But it's a finished manuscript that's sitting in my
Oh, it's already finished.
it's a finished manuscript sitting on my hard drive.
Oh, okay. Make sure you back it up. Don't lose it.
I will.
Good. So you mentioned that your short stories are mostly set in Hong Kong, and that's something that I've noticed about a lot of Hong Kong writers based in Hong Kong, such as yourself, is that somehow they just can't escape that. Having Hong Kong as their subject or backdrop, or at least it plays some important role in the story. Why do you think that this place, this city, has such a hold on us? What is special about it? How does it deserve to be in a story, in a book?
Well, firstly, the most obvious thing that comes to mind is the sight and sounds in Hong Kong. I mean, you have so much material. Everywhere you look, there's material. I walk my dog near my home, and I look around me, and I think this should be in a story. This should be set in a novel. This area, and to somebody else, they would look at that area and just maybe not think twice about it. It would be so ordinary looking, but every neighborhood that I walk in, I think, oh my God, this needs a story. We need to set a novel here, or have some sort of a story set here. And of course, a lot of this has been captured in movies and other books and whatnot. But I think on the surface, there is so much of that around us. But yeah, for me personally, I can say that because I grew up here, I've been here since I was 2. It is home, and it's a city that it's very much part of my upbringing, culture, all of that, and maybe part of it is just to sort of honor that, to pay tribute to it. Occasionally I write stories where the city is not playing a role or of any kind, or it's not even mentioned, but I just think there's too much to write about with Hong Kong to bypass it. So I bring it very much into the light.
What's your favorite area in Hong Kong?
Well, definitely Kowloon.
Yes.
But within Kowloon, it would be very difficult to choose. Probably around Kowloon City, Prince Edward, that neighborhood where I live now, sort of on the edge of Kowloon Tong.
Yes, I know that you and I have also bonded over being Kowloon girls.
Absolutely.
We always meet up in Kowloon. We refuse to go to the island.
Amen.
Okay, anything else that you would like to share about projects, or any shout out that you want to give to our listeners about writing?
In terms of writing, I'm excited that I get to participate in a monthly writing workshop with women in publishing, and recently have also joined Writer Circle. So it's exciting to see how much these communities in Hong Kong are growing, and to also see that there are other smaller writing communities flourishing. We have Write or Die in Lama. I love that. I love that this is not going away. This is very much part of us, and we're nurturing this through community and through friendship even. So please do seek us out. It doesn't matter which society it is. Just seek us out, and if you're interested in writing, and I invite you to come find these incredibly safe spaces to explore. And Julia, you're familiar with this, so would you say that these are the kind of societies where you want to try your writing out?
Yes, I love the word societies, by the way, because it reminds me a bit of the eateasies. It's something a bit like a club, you can be part
Yeah,
of. It's true, but like you said, they're also welcoming. Yes, they are safe spaces, and I love the regularity that they have. That I think pushes a lot of writers to stick to their craft and produce something, even when they're not so inspired. So let's face it, not every day is productive. And like you said,
absolutely.
life gets in the way and you have things sitting on your mind. Um, so what I enjoy about the Women in Publishing Society or the Hong Kong Writers Circle is that there are writing workshops, there are prompts, the anthologies come out every year, and that sort of pushes people to produce something even when they're not feeling like it. So I try that. Do you agree with that? The regularity
Absolutely,
helps.
absolutely. And their entry points, and for some people, they really take off with this and make this something even bigger than that. And I think that's wonderful. So I love that Hong Kong gives us that space and those opportunities. And I'm looking forward to hopefully welcoming some of these listeners to some of your listeners into these
Join us.
communities.
Hong Kongers do write. It's not true that they don't. There's always this idea, isn't it, that Hong Kong is a cultural desert, a place where people just work, 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 and money, 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 and that's true. But people write, people create, people do photography and other forms of art.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've seen that all around me. When I look at some of the people who join our writing workshops, they're women with full-time jobs, corporate jobs, and some of them are, whether they're professors or have other sort of corporate gigs, and they're still making the time to write and to show up to these workshops. So I agree with you completely. And there is a whole world of art and culture out here in Hong Kong that is growing. And we've seen that with the Lit Fest and now with the Arts Festival as well. And there's a lot going on in March. And this is already a good example of how much Hong Kong has to offer. Just if you look at the offerings just in March.
Yes. What is it with March?
I
March
don't
is
know.
always crazy. March and November, for some reason. That's when all the film festivals happen as well. It's just
Yeah.
these 2 months of the year when everything's happening.
Yeah.
And then we're just
And
exhausted
it's a
by
very
the end.
exciting time to be in the city.
Yes, it's exciting and exhausting. And now you're listening to this and thinking, why am I doing this? I'm just too tired to talk about books and writing. Thank you, Rinkoo. This has been really wonderful.
Thank you
It was
also,
lovely to hear your
Julia.
insights into the story and share a bit about yourself and your writing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Julia, for having me.
Welcome to Local Lingo. Today's phrase is one that I've been told perfectly complements A Fistful of Feet. Aidan, can you help me unpack 同枱食飯,各自修行?
Sure. 同枱食飯,各自修行 literally means eating at the same table, but each walking their own path. It's about how people can share a moment, like a meal, but still be on completely different journeys.
So it's like saying we're together, but we're not the same?
Pretty much. It's a way of pointing out that even when people are physically together, their goals and beliefs might be miles apart. Think family dinners, where everyone is arguing but still passing the rice.
That's perfect for A Fistful of Feet. Jane and Jeffrey are sitting at the same table in that eateasy, sharing a meal, but they're clearly on different paths. Jane's trying to follow the rules, while Jeffrey's rebelling against them. It's like they're together, but not together.
They're siblings bound by love and shared memories, but their choices pull them in opposite directions. And that's what makes Jane and Jeffrey's relationship so compelling. They're together, but they're not the same. 同枱食飯,各自修行.
Love that. Thanks, Aidan. This was your monthly dose of words from the fragrant harbour, brought to you by the writers of Hong Kong past and present. Have a great month of reading, and until next time on Hong Kong Lit Club, Hatigin.